Okay, welcome back. We are here for this week on surrealism. We're going to do an introduction to surrealism. You can see here that our topic, surrealism, is a global undercurrent from pages, navigating to your canvas through pages. You'll see here October 22nd, topic is 21st, 22nd. The topic is surrealism, a global undercurrent. We read from Breton, what is a surrealism. We watched this Louis Brunel and Chien Andalou. Notice the sensitive content alert. Notice that. And then we have reading response 6 due to Canvas. So the reading is due first, the watching next before class. This is us learning about surrealism in art. And then we're going to post the reading response a bit later. As we look here, that's what the information is here, as well as the links. So if we're looking at surrealism as a global undercurrent, we can think about it beginning in the 1920s as a movement to unlock creativity through the unconscious mind. Unconscious mind. We have artists such as Salvador Dali, Merritt Oppenheim, Leora Carrington, who use dreams, chance, and imagination to challenge logic and social norms. So this module will help us explore how surrealists visualize the unseen, how they practice something called psychic automatism to reveal deeper truths about reality and identity. So we can see our learning outcomes here. I'll highlight that. By the end of the module, we want to be able to define and explain core surrealist concepts. We have the core surrealist concepts of automatism, dream logic, the uncanny, and chance. So automatism, dream logic, the uncanny, and chance are core surrealist concepts. We also want to identify and analyze key artworks and techniques. We're connecting surrealism to Dada, psychoanalysis, and modern identity. The connection is important. We also want to experiment with surrealist creative methods in your own work. And then we'll reflect on surrealism's global and gendered perspectives. So we have several steps here. I'm going to walk through each of the steps and then we'll go back to talk about the lecture. So this is me explaining what we're doing for this unusual asynchronous session for surrealism. The first step is to watch the recorded lecture. It's going to be about 45 minutes. You're already doing that now. And so you've already found the link. You'll want to take notes on three main ideas. The first is, what is psychic automatism? Then, how do surrealists use dreams or the unconscious? And what role does identity play in these works? By the time you've done that, we're able to move on to step two, where you read and reflect. That should take about 35 minutes. Should take about 35 minutes. I'm going to highlight these areas for you. You're reading the excerpt from Andre Breton's Manifesto of Surrealism. The link is in Canvas. You'll watch the 3-minute clip from Un Chien Andalou. You've already done that up to this point. And then we'll answer the quick quiz in Canvas that asks you to define psychic automatism in your own words. You want to name one surrealist technique, and then we'll describe one dreamlike image or moment from the film. Step three is a museum micro tour. This can be as long as 45 minutes. Don't go longer than that. But you'll choose one track, choose one track, choose one track, and visit the links provided. When you do that, you can write a 200-word reflection That includes one annotated image or sketch. So here are the options. The objects in the uncanny are one of the options for a track. Dream realism is an option for a track. Chance and collaboration is an option for a track. So we have three different tracks, and you'll notice the artwork titles here and where you can find them as you're going to be including an annotated image or a sketch. All right, so we have that here, the micro tour. Step 4 is to create your own surrealist drawing. It might take 30 minutes, it might not, but you'll use automatic drawing. You'll draw freely without planning or judgment. You'll upload a photo of your drawing and write a 100-word reflection on what came out. There are a couple of tips that we can use for this activity exercise to get you into the relaxed, dreamlike state that the surrealists really promoted and enjoyed. That's up to you. And then step 5 has to do with identity and representation. It should take about 30 minutes. You'll choose one of the following artworks from either Leonora Carrington or Claude Calhoun. Choose one, and respond in either 250 words or a 2-minute video note or audio note that answers the prompts. How does the artist use surrealism to express selfhood, gender, or transformation? I'll repeat that. How does the artist use surrealism to express selfhood, gender, or transformation? Okay, so here's step 4, 5, and 6 again. Um, and you'll notice that step 6 is a technique explainer. That's a new one for us. It's about 20 minutes long. You'll read from Smart History about surrealist techniques and ideas. The link will be in Canvas, and you'll write a 100-word post for your peers that explain one surrealist method, such as collage, frottage, automatism, assemblage, and one artwork that demonstrates it. An artwork that demonstrates collage, an artwork that demonstrates frottage, one that demonstrates automatism, or one that demonstrates assemblage. So here's what we are looking for in terms of criteria for your learning this session. We're looking at accuracy, observation, clarity, and the transfer of themes. We want to be able to connect these ideas to larger modern art ideas. And then if you're feeling very excited about surrealism, there's an optional extension to our activity where you're able to explore the online exhibition Drawing Surrealism, which was fairly recent at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. If you do this, you can post one surprising takeaway and one question for discussion. Okay. Here are further instruction and details. You know much of this at this point, but here are the submissions instructions. All the work and media files should be at Canvas, on Canvas by Sunday, this coming Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Label your files this way, and then notice your last name goes here, your first name goes here, and then make sure you do your peer comments. This is required. Talking to classmates about their posts is encouraged, but it's optional. And then we have support and accessibility. Just note that we have the option to write or record audio reflections. We can submit photos, drawings, or text. We can use captions and accessibility tools in Canvas. So if you need help as we go, contact me via Canvas or via email. Here are our learning goals. We want to define and explain core surrealist ideas. We want to identify and analyze major surrealist artworks. We want to trace surrealism's roots in data and psychoanalysis. In this way, we can focus on Andre Breton's 1924 manifesto. We also want to apply surrealist methods. So we're thinking about automatic drawing, we're thinking about something called the exquisite corpse, and we're thinking about creative reflection. And then we also want to explore how identity, gender, and authorship are represented in surrealist art. So here's our session outline. We have the introduction and context, historical foundations, core techniques and themes, the visual language of surrealism, identity, gender, and selfhood, reflection, and application. And then we have a list of some key artworks for us. Here is an overview of the asynchronous learning model. This is the time that you'll be working on your own independently. This is independent work time in addition to your time listening to the lecture. You'll recall our discussion of Dada last time. We learned about Marcel Duchamp. We also learned about Hannah Hoch and the chaos that came out of war, in particular World War One. So we talked about how collage and the key concepts of modernism come together here as we were considering and working with Dada. Let's continue. This is the time where I'll offer a mini lecture to surrealism and an introduction to surrealism. We can observe this particular map. When you think of maps, we can ask what comes to mind. Josh R. Rose's introduction to surrealism is useful here because he offers us this map during the world during the time of the surrealists. And this was published in 1929 in an issue of their journal called the Surrealism in the journal Variety. So take a moment and look at the map. Many times when we look at a map, we are expecting an informative document. It's something that a traveler could use. We could see demarcations of national borders. We could see geographic features. Maps are tied to some sort of factual representation of the world. And it's not an idea that is fictitious or subjective, but in fact, we notice the surrealist map is fictitious. It is subjective. The map was made by members of the Surrealist movement in 1929. It was published in Belgium, and it could seem unsettling because it emphasizes certain areas while removing others and dramatically changes the size of the land masses. So the question we might ask ourselves is, well, how is this map different from the world we know? And although it might seem like an odd place to start, what can this tell us about the surrealists? The map and understanding what's going on with the map might be better understood through two key ideas. The first key, well, we'll do three key ideas. The first key idea is psychic freedom. Psychic freedom. The next one is automatic drawing and the exquisite corpse. Those both are techniques of surrealism. And then we have the experience of surrealism. That is the surrealist experience. Most often, when historians are thinking about Dada, it's described as an offshoot of Dada. In fact, I'm sorry, when historians introduce surrealism, it's described as an offshoot of Dada. It makes sense because in the early 1920s, Andre Breton and Louis Aragon, who are writers, they became involved with Parisian Dada. And they shared the group's interest in anarchy, the group's interest in revolution. But they felt that Dada was without clear direction for political action. So they left in 1922. They began looking to the mind as the source of social liberation, not the things and changing the world outside, but they shifted to thinking about the mind. They were influenced by French psychology. They were influenced by Sigmund Freud. They were influenced by practices that allowed them to explore the subconscious. This is what we're thinking about with psychic freedom. They're exploring subconscious thought, they're exploring identity, and they're bypassing restrictions placed on people by social conventions. So if we think about an example, if you're in a group of people at the mall in public and you started screaming suddenly, you're encountering people and suddenly you just started screaming curses at them unprovoked, that's completely socially unacceptable. But these are um, subconscious or unconscious restrict uh, ideas that would be restricted. The surrealist practices included uh, uh, this waking dream seance session that we're talking about here from the Bureau of Surrealist Research from 1924. During these dream seances, group members would uh, put themselves into a trance state. They would recite visions or poetic passages, and they would do it with an immediacy that seemed to deny or, make people doubt that they were faking. Um, the surrealists, you see, were considering themselves as scientists. They thought of what they were doing as a scientific pursuit. So it was not like similar techniques used by spiritualists to communicate with the dead, but this notion of communicating in different ways and communicating with spirits was um, something that was a discourse in the 1920s. People were thinking about these sorts of things. But for the surrealists, the waking dream sessions allowed their members to say and do things unburdened by society, unburdened by society's expectations. This stopped, it ended abruptly when one of the dreamers attempted to stab another person with a kitchen knife. Um, but we know that these members were working against societal expectations. The technique of automatic writing that they used allowed highly trained poets to circumvent their own training. These highly trained poets um, were frustrated by the ways in which their training impacted their art. And they thought that if they could compose without forethought, without planning, it was more beautiful and more startling. We know that these ideas were in part indebted to Sigmund Freud. He lived between 1856 and 1839. Here we see the interpretation of dreams from 1918. Sigmund Freud, I think of as the granddaddy of psychoanalysis because in 1889, Freud proposes the idea of the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is, of course, thought to underlie the ego, and this is what everyone creates for themselves as people. Um, but the unconscious is sometimes opposed to the equal ego. So we think about the subconscious, the unconscious, it comes up in our conversations, but when Sigmund Freud writes this down, it's the earliest notion of the unconscious, and it's hugely impactful. Here we see the Surrealist Central from 1924. In the autumn of 1924, Surrealism was announced to the public through the publication of this journal, the first manifesto of Surrealism, and the formation of a bureau, the Bureau of Surrealist Research. We saw them not so long ago, the Bureau of Surrealist Research. The literary focus of the movement expanded to visual art because Max Ernst and other visual artists joined. They began applying surrealist ideas to their artwork, and they had many stylistic references. Here's an example of automatic drawing from Andre Masson. What we see is the unfettered, kind of unplanned process that was used by surrealist writers. But for Masson, he used this to make visual images. So we see hands, torsos, genitalia within this swirling mass of lines. And it suggests that as the artist dives deeper into their own subconscious, there were recognizable forms that came out on the page. There was yet another technique called the exquisite corpse. Well, let me pause. Here's another example of automatic writing. Here, I would like to show you the exquisite corpse. Yves Tanguy, Juan Moreau, Max Maurice, and Man Ray in 1926 come together to produce this particular technique. It developed first from a writing game where a piece of paper is folded and each player takes one side of the paper and draws the head of a body. And as the artist continues drawing, the lines disappear beyond the fold. And then each person in the group has drawn their part of the body. So this exquisite corpse is then unfolded to reveal a strange or composite creature, a strange or composite creature that is made up of unrelated pieces, these forms that are now merged. It's kind of like a surrealist Frankenstein's monster. That's automatic drawing. I'll post this video so you can watch. But in artworks like this one, we see that automatic drawing gives us vague images, whereas exquisite corpse drawings show precisely rendered objects that are juxtaposed with others, and sometimes in strange combinations. So these are the two distinct styles that represent two contrasting approaches to the surrealist art. We can think about this through Yves Tanguy and through Rene Magritte. Tanguy began painting this apparitions using an automatic technique for unplanned areas of color. And then he clarified forms by making shapes in the landscape. And he's using naturalistic objects in this painting. So we have this notion of juxtaposition, putting two things together that don't go, and uh, the kind of mysterious meaning for these pictures, similar to the hybrid creatures in exquisite corpse drawings. So the two visual style, one, automatic drawing, the other being the exquisite corpse. These two visual styles extend to other surrealist media that include photography, sculpture, and film. So we think of surrealism primarily as a visual arts movement, but the activity comes from bigger ideas. By teaching people how to get around the society's restrictions, the surrealists saw themselves as agents of social change. And have been hearing about this interest in social change. The surrealists attempted to connect their cause with the French Communist Party. They wanted to be the artistic and cultural arm, but they were incompatible groups. So the surrealist effort is what we note is part of their political goal. But in its purest form, surrealism was a way of life. In fact, we have this idea of the urban flaneur, the explorer who walks through cities without a plan or without an intention. The explorers who are looking for moments of chance, these ideas of random encounters that are then considered to be full of meaning. These folks disrupted cultural norms with their actions, and they were looking for surreality, this notion that one's internal reality could be merged with the outside world that we all share. Those experiences, like that shown by Merritt Oppenheim's object from 1936, in fact, give us a sense that these surreal experiences could be represented. Um, this idea of merging the external with the inner. Here's Andre Breton in 1924. Here's Marc Chagall from 1915. You see the kind of moodiness of the light and the shade. Henry Rousseau's 1907 fantastical images. Marc Chagall from 1915 again. Um, and if we go back to our map and we think about the non-national borders of the surrealists, we can think about how their arrangement of territories and labels on the map may align with their political views. This is actually a anti-colonial diatribe. The map removes the colonial powers to create a world that's dominated by cultures untouched, seemingly untouched by Western influence or participators in the communist experiment, which suggests and which tells us that surrealism is part a vision, a utopian vision. It's part a promotion of the surrealists' own individual agendas, but it's also an homage to their influences. So we need to think about surrealism as an international movement. And while it was founded in Paris, we see surrealism in other areas in Europe, Belgium, England, Czechoslovakia, Mexico, the United States, Latin America, Japan. And so even if it started in 1924 and lasted to the end of the 1940s, and even as late as the 1960s, surrealism is very impactful because of the later influence on abstract expressionism, on other movements such as art brut or the situationists, for the ways in which it's relevant and meaningful to art history today. So we see here uh, with Buffon's big toe, the movement into photography and the ideas of making things strange. Brass Eye Snood from 1934. We have a suspended ball by Alberto Giacometti from 1930. And this is a good example for us to think with Salvador Dali's surrealist object functioning symbolically from 1931. We have an assemblage. Assemblage is very closely related to collage, but an assemblage is the assembly with objects like we see here. We had shoe, marble, photographs, glass, hair scraper, and gibbet. So we see these objects coming together. And the question is, well, what is the relationship among them? And that, in fact, is an unanswered question. Uh, it's the provocation, the idea of making something strange or bizarre or new that is that's motivating Hans Belmer This is a photograph untitled from the Doll from 1936. We see that the ideas of the surrealists show up in paintings in unusual materials such as sand, gesso, oil. Um, we have Exquisite Corpse here from 1927. Juan Moreau gives us this and titles it The Kiss from 1924. And we have Un Chien Andalou from 1929. And these, the way of interpreting these kind of subconscious or psychoanalytic ideas um, as object, thinking about the objects of desire, the ways in which the surrealists are using everyday objects or objects that they find or collect to produce their creative work and make sense of the world. We also have this introduction by Peter Garibaldi to surrealism, uh, which will be posted on Canvas. So the idea of surrealism as an artistic movement is that the ways in which surrealists imagine a new world is particularly useful for us as makers and as creatives. The surrealists are exploring new ideas about consciousness and rationality. And we know with this, the following slide, we learn that surrealism comes out of Dada. The key ideas have to do with psychic freedom. We learn about two new techniques developed by the surrealists, including automatic drawing and the exquisite corpse. We can think also about the surrealist experience, the idea of wandering through or surreality. We can think also with automatism and non-national boundaries to get a sense of what the surrealists were attempting with their artwork. So we have several videos that we can watch that will offer uh, uh, much more detailed information. Uh, we have MoMA's Surrealist Women, which you can explore online. And then we have the notion of surrealism as influential today. You see the key ideas here again: psychic freedom, automatic drawing, the exquisite corpse, subversive realism, collage, and photography are ways towards getting through to the surrealist experience. Um, and if we're able to do that, we'll able to better understand um, why or how strange these movements were for these people. The idea of engaging the subconscious mind, which was uh, a new way of approach, a new way of living in this moment. Let's go back for a quick overview review. Again, we have Dada and Surrealism. They are closely related, but we have some historical foundations from 1924. We learned about the core techniques and themes. Uh, we thought about the exquisite corpse and the automatic drawing. We also have the visual language of surrealism. We're thinking here about the ways Nassan and others would use collage or apply things to canvas in highly unusual ways. We also have Oppenheim's object, which is a fur-covered cup, saucer, and spoon. Rene Magritte with his painting titled The Treachery of Images. Each of these things help us better understand the visual language of surrealism and the ways in which identity, gender, and selfhood impact what the surrealists are producing and making. Um, at which time, in this case, we can move to reflection and application. We have some key artworks here that are provided for your reference, but also we have the assignment as stated in Canvas. Let's see if I can reformat this quickly. Here we are. It's easier to read. Uh, so I'll look at a few more things. Leora Carrington producing a self-portrait, a surreal self-portrait, and Claude Calhoun from 1929. He made the two. You see this photograph um, and its emphasis on that which is strange. Marcel Jean from 1936. It's a plaster head, which um, which says something about the specter of the gardenia. It's not entirely clear to us what the precise references are, in part because the surrealists were interested in mystery and discovery. I'm looking to make sure that I have not forgotten any images. Here's Giorgio de Chirico from 1913, The Uncertainty of the Poet. Uh, it could be an interesting way of engaging all sorts of ideas in this surreal, non-descriptive landscape. Okay, so now that we have gone through our overview lecture of surrealism, I'm going to go back and make sure we see that we have these each of these areas for today's session. We are defining and explaining core surrealist ideas, identifying and analyzing major works, tracing surrealism's roots from Dada and psychoanalysis, applying surrealist methods such as automatic drawing and exquisite corpse to creative reflection, and exploring how identity, gender, and authorship are represented in surrealist art. Okay, so here we go. We have our asynchronous learning module here. It might take 2.5 hours, it might take much less. But here's what we'll do. The primer has to do with Breton and film for 35 minutes. You'll read Breton's Manifesto of Surrealism and watch an Chien Andalou clip if you haven't already. And then you'll want to define psychic automatism, identify a surrealist technique, and describe a dreamlike element. B is a museum micro tour. And when I say museum micro tour, this time we're just looking digitally at the museum's website. You want to find or you want to choose one track and respond in 200 words and an annotated image to the following. Choose one of these tracks, Objects in the Uncanny, Dream Realism, or Chance and Collaboration. Just choose one of them. So for instance, if I choose Dream Realism, then I could address Dolly and Magritte, and in particular, the artwork called False Mirror. Next, we have the creative task, which is about 30 minutes long. And what we need there is an automatic drawing. You want to make a spontaneous sketch and then upload it. When you upload it, add a 100-word process reflection. How did it go? What did you learn as you were doing it? We have a 30-minute window to think about identity. Might compare Leora Carrington to Claude Calhoun in the terms of their artwork. And you may, again, record an audio or write 250 words uh, related to these ideas. And then it's E, the technique explainer. His technique explainer um, asks you to read Smart History on Surrealism and then post 100-word explanation that names one technique and one artwork example. And that explanation will be assessed based on accuracy, observation, clarity, and transfer. Okay, so that is a good place for us to pause for today. In terms of the lecture, there will be a number of things for you to observe and listen to and watch and make notes on uh, based on the readings and based on your synthesis. So in Canvas, you will get these specific instructions to complete what we're doing for this week. Again, we have an asynchronous session, and all of these materials will be in vibrant conversation uh, when we come back. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.